أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين ولعنة الله الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من ليلتنا هذه إلى قيام يوم الدين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we've gathered tonight on the 5th night of Muharram with the intention of pleasing Allah by remembering the tragedy that befell the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam on the day of Ashura. And along with that, we're reminding ourselves of our responsibilities, of the teachings that they've given us to be able to lead our lives in a way that's pleasing to Allah. The topic that I've been covering over the previous nights has been a topic which inshallah is of relevancy to our lives. We're living in a culture in which many of the foundations, many of the practices are contrary to the Tawheedi culture and the Tawheedi lifestyle that Islam prescribes for us. We're living in a culture which has different aspects, one of them being that of instant gratification. And we've been talking about how when we analyze this concept of being instantly gratified, and we look at different examples and applications of that, we see that in many areas of our lives, we need to re-examine and be aware that the way it's commonly done in the culture is different than the way that Islam prescribes for us. Tonight I want to address another aspect of this, another example of how instant gratification affects the way we do something important. But before I go there, I want to address a question that was posed to me after the speech last night. The question was something like this, and I appreciate the question, that based on what we talked about last night with regards to the concept of education, and how I mentioned the importance of education, both in terms of secular education, if we're pursuing that, once we've identified that this is our responsibility, I mentioned that we should do that to the best of our abilities. We talked about Islamic education as well too. The question was this, that is it the case that Islam calls us to shun the dunya? Are we supposed to run away from the dunya? Is it the case that we're only supposed to learn about Islamic sciences and focus on that and not worry about the other type of education? As we mentioned yesterday, secular education, so-called secular education, is important as well too. And those things that we study, we shouldn't imagine that if they're proper sciences, proper knowledge, we shouldn't imagine that somehow they are anti-God or anti-Islamic. In fact, when we go to the origins of these sciences, where did they come from? There are some theories which say that on the basis of examining ahadith and also some verses in the Quran, for example, the verse about how Allah teaches Nabi Nuh alayhi salam how to build ships, and Allah teaches Nabi Sulaiman and Nabi Dawood alayhi salam about how to work with iron and build and create and construct coats of mail, and other verses as well too, and riwayat as well too. There's some theories which pose that all of the sciences that we have, and all of the crafts that we had, and all the skills that humanity has learnt over the centuries, they all derive from the prophets of Allah. Because the prophets were the one that Allah sent to guide us. And guidance isn't just in the form of how to attain our best position in the hereafter, but it involves how to live our lives in this world to be able to attain a good position in the hereafter. So those teachings that we learn, those sciences that we learn, when we're learning algebra, when we're learning chemistry, when we're learning even the skill of writing, right? These aren't something that are away from Islam. If they're done with the right intention, they can also be a means of getting closer to Allah. And when we use them to work with the dunya, and we're doing that for good purposes, for good intentions, then we should know that we're doing something which is exactly the reason why we were created. This dunya, brothers and sisters, is not meant for us to run away from. Yes, the dunya which is haram, that dunya which takes us away from Allah, is to be shunned and avoided. But otherwise, this dunya is here for a purpose, and we are supposed to work with it and make it be a place and a means for attaining the hereafter. Let's see what the Imams ﷺ said regarding this. This is a hadith that we have from Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. A man comes to him and he asks him, he says that, I swear by Allah that we are the ones who hunger for the dunya. And we wish that we would be given the dunya. Imam al-Islam looks at him and he says that, can you please clarify, what is it that you mean by your saying that you love the dunya and that you work for it? What is it that you actually do? He says, أَعُودُ بِهَا عَلَى نَفْسِي وَعِيَالِي. With the dunya, I take care of my expenses and the expenses of my dependents. وَأَصِلُ بِهَا. And I do silatul rahim. I help my family who is in need as well too. وَأَتَصَدَّقُ بِهَا. I give charity as well too. وَأَحُجُّ وَأَعْتَمِرُ. And I go for pilgrimage and I do umrah as well too. So the Imam ﷺ says what? لَيْسَ هَذَا طَلَبَ الدُّنْيَا هَذَا طَلَبُ الْآخِرَةِ. This isn't hungering and seeking the dunya. This is hungering after and seeking the hereafter. The dunya is the means for seeking the hereafter. So inshallah, I hope that this concept has been clarified, that in the ahadith, in the Quran, when the dunya is disparaged, it's the way that we deal with the material world, not the material world in and of itself. Please say salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The aspect of living and of life that I'd like to, inshallah, cover tonight is that of having children and raising children. Now this is a topic which is of eminent importance to many of the brothers and sisters because you have children and you're raising children. But there's a small number of you whom, at least at first glance, it may seem that this is something which is irrelevant to you because you don't have children. So I just want to create motivation for the topic by saying that first of all, those of you who don't have children, inshallah one day you will have children and this will be important for you then. Second of all, even if you don't have children, you do deal with children. Many, for example, of the youth are involved in organizing activities and teaching in the Sunday school, and teaching in the Islamic school. Even if they themselves don't have children, they're still in the position where they're helping to raise children. And also, some of the principles that we're talking about here don't have to just deal with raising children, but in general have to do with how to interact with and help our mu'mineen and help advance the cause and help each other move towards Allah. And you'll see what I'm talking about inshallah as we go along and give some examples. Now in this culture of instant gratification, you see that the idea of having children itself is brought under question. And you look at the statistics, you see that the number of people having children is decreasing. The number of children being born is decreasing as well too. Why is it that I should have kids? Kids are difficult. Kids are expensive. Kids are messy. Kids are annoying. Isn't it just easier to play with my niece and nephew and, because one thing about kids is sometimes it's fun to play with them, but I can get that some other way. Just find some kids to play with. But otherwise, why should I have my own kids? Isn't it better for me just to focus on my own life and my own career and do things that way? Because after all, it's about instant gratification for the self. Now, if I have to worry about my child, then I'm worrying about gratifying my child, not myself. And oftentimes that means putting aside my own gratification and looking towards the gratification of my child. I'm just giving you some of the philosophy, type of thinking that somebody might have when they're looking at this in a pure material and secular and non-tawhidi perspective, somebody who is part of that type of culture. So what I'd like to first do is talk about a little bit about the position of a parent. We all know that Allah has placed extreme importance on this position of a parent. And in the Quran, He mentions the responsibility of doing kindness and treating our parents with respect right after the responsibility of worshipping Him. That's how important it is. But why? What is the philosophy behind that? Let's step back a little bit and look at what is the philosophy of a human being in the first place. What is it that we were created for? Why is it that God chose to create us as a different type of creation than His other creations? The Quran tells us in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. He says that وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. O angels, the angels who themselves had a great amount of perfection, who were obedient and devout servants of God, Allah is informing them that He is going to create and place in the earth a Khalifa, one who represents Him. What does it mean to represent Allah in the earth? It means that all of the perfection and all of the attributes of God will be reflected in this being, or at least the human being has the potential to reflect those. In another verse of the Quran, Allah says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, this is Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 72. إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَنْ يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ. Allah talks about this divine and weighty trust that He wishes to give to one of His creations. He says that He looked, in paraphrasing here, He looked at the skies, and the skies were not willing or able or capable to bear this divine and weighty trust. He looked upon the earth, and He didn't see any creation of His there able and willing and capable of bearing this divine trust. Even the mountains, with all of their firmness and all of their magnificence. What was that one creation that had this potential to bear this divine trust? What is this trust? It's the trust of, according to ahadith and the commentators, it's the trust of being able to attain proximity to Allah. The only being that has that capability is the human being. Now, this human being needs to be able to bear that trust because it has the potential, but needs to grow in order to be able to actually attain that potential. Who is it that's tasked with ensuring and helping this human being grow to be able to attain that trust? It's the parents of that human being. So, the most important thing for which God has created the human being has been entrusted with the parents. Imagine that you had a company that had a very precious company secret. And they had to find somebody who would be the only person who could actually keep this secret and then actually work on it and implement it and make the product that was necessary for it. And they chose, out of all the people in the company, they chose, you, for example. How would people look at you? They'd say, this person must be special. They must have a lot of capabilities. Why is it that they were chosen? Here, it's the parents who are chosen to fulfill this incredible responsibility. That's why they deserve the respect that they have. And that's why they have this responsibility, and they have to also understand the nature of the responsibility that Allah has placed them with. So this is a bit about the philosophy behind parents. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the aspects of parenting and how we need to understand the Islamic perspective versus the perspective of the dominant culture we're in. Please say salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You see, brothers and sisters, the need to have a child is something which is inherent in us. In particular in the female. Because when you look at a woman, she has an innate desire to nurture. Now, people might say that, wait a minute, what is this thing about innate desires or not, right? In this culture, we have to go, we have to study, we have to get a career, we have to do that type of thing. Innate desires or not, that's what we need to do. But when we look at and see that if there's something which is innate to us, there's a reason why that has been created in us. So having children is something which is a divine gift from Allah, and it's one of the great opportunities we have to truly grow closer to Allah and also to enjoy ourselves as well too. Those of you who are parents, I think you'll agree with me that despite all the difficulties, despite all the challenges, at the end of the day, if we were given the chance again to go back and not have children and just enjoy our lives the way we were, none of us would take that option. Because we've seen that despite all of that, there's some other types of benefits and other types of joy that would not have been gone except with this experience. Now, in this type of culture, people might say that, okay, I don't have the time to really be involved with my children's upbringing. And so that's why you see that a lot of usage of daycares and a lot of usage of babysitters and making children go to preschool at an early age, etc. Now, how do we analyze this particular phenomenon? Is this something which is good or something which needs to be re-examined? From the perspective of Islam, if we want our children to be raised in the correct way, it's going to require time and effort on the part of the mother and the father. And there's no way around this. In order to combat the negative effects of the culture, it's necessary for us to be able to spend time with our children, both the mother and the father. Now the father's responsibility is there, but I want to spend a little bit of time on the mother's responsibility. Because when we ask the question, which of the two is better equipped to be able to take on the primary responsibility of raising the children, obviously the answer is the mother. And therefore, in Islam, the primary responsibility is given to the mother. Now how does that work with the idea of the mother working outside of the home? This is a very important issue that we need to spend a minute or two on, brothers and sisters. Because these days we're seeing that a lot of people are finding challenges of living on one income. And we see a lot of wives and mothers having to work. Is this something which is wrong, something which is haram, something which Islam says they shouldn't do at all? The answer is no. Islam has given us certain parameters of what types of occupations we can take, what sort of etiquette we should have when we're taking them. And there's some occupations which are not appropriate for men to be involved with, and some that are not appropriate for women to be involved with as well. So once we figure that out though, there's nothing inherently wrong with a woman working outside of the home. However, we have to understand a few things. First of all, the primary responsibility of bringing in the income for the household lies with the husband. The woman should not feel obligated to work. It might be the case that she realizes that she needs to help out, and she's able to do it, and she's doing it out of her own will, but it's not an obligation for her. Secondly, we have to understand what is the most important responsibility. If it's the case that working outside of the home is going to have a negative impact on the upbringing of the children, then we have to see where our priorities lie. And this is where it becomes sometimes difficult for people. Because sometimes we have a problem with this idea of a woman staying home. In this culture, what's valued is career. What's valued is the positions that we have, the salary that we make. If you tell somebody that, you know what, I'm going to shun all of that, I'm going to stay home and take care of my kids, for some people, that's considered an insult. It's considered something which is inferior. But from the Islamic perspective, brothers and sisters, we have to say that one of the most noble occupations that anybody can ever have is that of staying at home and making sure that the kids are being taken care of in the proper way. Please say salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This stereotype needs to be broken, needs to be re-examined. There's nothing wrong, even if, let's say, that there is a mother who is very intelligent, very capable of doing things outside of the home. But she realizes that there is no way of balancing. Maybe there is some way. In some cases, for example, she can bring some of her work home. She can work part-time. She can work half the day, etc. She can involve family to help out and they can work something out. We know of many cases where people have been able to do that. But let's say it comes to the point where it's a choice between the career versus the children's upbringing. In that case, if she gives up the career, she should know that in no way is she going to be shortchanged when it comes to the hereafter. Because after all, brothers and sisters, we've come into this world to accomplish a purpose which is serving Allah and being a slave of Allah. And if our responsibility calls us to give up a career, at least temporarily, in order to focus on our children, then there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, we'll be rewarded even more for that, for the sacrifice that's been done. Please say one more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Now, a couple of points about raising children. First of all, we have this concept within Islamic teachings which is called tadrij, which is called, when working with people and trying to help them grow and mature, we have to do so understanding that human beings grow in stages. It's not an immediate sort of thing. Allah tells us in the Quran, in regards to this one trait that we have, which is that we want to see things being done right away and instantaneously. He says, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ عَجُولًا. Because human beings are overly hasty. And then he goes on to give an example. It's very beautiful. He says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ آيَتَيْنِ فَمَحَوْنَا آيَةَ اللَّيْلِ وَجَعَلْنَا آيَةَ النَّهَارِ مُبْصِرَةً لِتَبْتَغُوا فَضْلًا مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. It's very beautiful. Right after this verse where Allah says that He's created us in a way that we're overly hasty, He gives us an example about the way He's created this universe. He says, look at the way that the night and day work. Is it the case that when nighttime comes, it comes immediately? That suddenly it's bright and then suddenly it's dark right away? No. In fact, the process of the sun setting or the sun rising is a gradual process, where slowly, over the course of, for example, an hour, 15 minutes, depending on where you are, the darkness will set in the evening, or in the morning it will become bright. It's a slow process. And this is a sign of God. And some of the commentators have mentioned that this is a lesson for us, that when it comes to this universe, Allah has created everything with its own time and its own stages. The growth of a child and the development of a child is no different. A child will grow in stages. And when we go to the Islamic teachings regarding how we should raise our children, they're filled with reminders about this concept that your children are going to be going through stages. Now, one of the things that we see in this culture of instant gratification is that sometimes there's a tendency to want our children to be educated and to be ahead of the game at a very young age. You see parents trying to compete with each other to enroll their tiny children, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, in the best of private academies, spending thousands of dollars, and they're trying to see who is going to be able to read the first, who's going to do the math there first, etc. And there's this enormous emphasis on trying to get things done faster. If my child's not reading by the age of 4, does that mean that they're going to be slow and they're going to miss out later on? Now, when you go and examine this and you compare this to the teachings that we have within Islam, you see that this type of overemphasis at a very young age is not prescribed. It's not something which we are ought to do. Let me give you one example, a tradition from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, leave your child to play for 7 years. And then for 7 years, your child will be trained and disciplined. This is just one example of a number of traditions which tell us that for the first 7 years, the emphasis should not be on trying to overly educate and trying to really put the pressure on our children. It can be detrimental to the children as well too. And this is an area of research for you. If you go and look at what they say about different school systems around the world, there's some school systems which start teaching children at the age of even 4 years old, or even 3 years old, but there's others that wait until the age of 7 years old. For example, the country of Sweden, they start educating the children at 7, and now, from our perspective, we might think that, oh my God, 2-3 years are being just wasted there when the children are at home and not learning. But oddly enough, statistics show that the level of education in Sweden and the performance of graduates from the school system in Sweden is better than any country in the world. Why is that the case? There's a principle that we have of having to work in a gradual sort of way. Now, that's the area of secular education, even when it comes to Islamic education as well too. Sometimes parents are very keen on their children being good Muslims, and this is a good desire. There's nothing wrong with that. But the way we are going to teach our children to be good Muslims is very important. The procedures that we go through is very important. Is it the case that as soon as our child is old enough to, for example, start being able to talk, that we need to have them learn the Arabic alphabet? Is it the case that our children, as soon as they're able to remain hungry for a bit, we have them go and fast? As soon as they're able to stand up, then we have them go and say their prayers? This is not the approach that we've been taught by the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Again, they taught us to do a gradual approach. There's certain ages that we're told that at this age, this is when you ought to teach your child how to say their prayers. At this age, this is when you should teach your child how to fast. And even then, don't teach your, for example, having children fasting before 7 years old is not something that is prescribed by the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. They don't want our children to be fasting earlier than 7 years old. And even afterwards, when they're fasting, it should be the case where they fast a little bit, and then when they get hungry, they should be told to break their fast. I still remember one of my teachers, he was telling us that his son, before he had reached of age, it was at the point where he was begging his parents to let him fast the whole day. But my teacher and his wife were telling him, no, you're not supposed to fast the whole day. This is a teacher of the Hawza, and not just a normal teacher, a very good teacher of the Hawza. Why is he doing this? Now, what's going to happen? That when that child comes of age, is he going to see the taklif that now has been placed on his shoulders? Is he going to see it as a burden? Or is he going to see it as an honor and a privilege? That's the philosophy that we have behind this type of education. The principle of gradual education. Peace and salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. There's one other area I wanted to mention with regards to education before moving to the portion of the Masaib, inshallah. It has to do with disciplining children. Somebody who is quick to react based on emotion, when faced with disciplinary problems in their children, they'll immediately react to them. If the child is out of line, they'll shout at them. If they move around when they shouldn't be moving around, they'll make sure to do something to occupy them so they're not going to move around. They're quick to enforce discipline, quick to put in rules into place, ground children, give them timeouts, etc. But what is the Islamic perspective on disciplining our children? I'm going to give a few guidelines that we have when it comes to this concept of disciplining. This primarily applies to children who are from the ages 0 to 7 years old. But some of the principles also apply to children beyond that as well too. First of all, if our child does something and we feel that we need to discipline, somebody who doesn't want to think about it, they're going to have a knee-jerk reaction and lash out. But first we should see whether this is even something which needs to be disciplined. Sometimes we think that our child has done something wrong, but actually it's not wrong. It's something which is very much in accordance with their stage of development. Because children go through stages of development. Between the ages of 0 and 7, there will be times when our children are very keen on exploring. There will be times when they're very keen on going and breaking things. There'll be times that they're very keen on being stubborn and showing that they can stand up to authority, etc. If we see that our child is doing this, is it our place to discipline them just because they're doing something that from our perspective is wrong? Why is it wrong if this is the way that Allah has created them? This is an important stage of their development. We're told to let our child be free, let them be the master in the first 7 years. What that means is that a child overall during the first 7 years, they're going to have this spirit of wanting to be free. And if we go and try to curtail that spirit, then we're going to face the consequences later on. On the other hand, if we're able to give them that freedom that they need, that freedom to play, that freedom to explore, that freedom to go and make a mess, that freedom to pull out books from the bookshelf and play with those dishes and whatever it is and run around, then we'll see that after those first 7 years, it will be like a fertile ground that's waiting for us to just plant that seed, and we'll see the seeds sprout. So it's very important that first of all, if we want to discipline, we should see, is it really something that we need to discipline? Maybe this is something the child is supposed to be doing. Maybe it's our problem that we're seeing it as being something wrong. Please say salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, beyond that, it might be the case that it's not something that they should be doing at this age. But still, we have to go and see what is the cause behind this particular behavior that they're doing. For example, our child is refusing to eat, they're whining, they're bullying another child. What is the reason behind that? Sometimes the reason is actually a cause which goes back to our own problem. For example, one of the needs our children have is to be out in nature and to play. To go, for example, to the playground, to go to the parks, to go hiking, etc. It's a need that they have because they have energy within them that needs to be taken out. Let's say that we have an apartment type of lifestyle, meaning that we just live in our apartment the whole day and we don't go out. Let's say that our primary means of disciplining our children and raising our children is to put them in front of the TV. Then is it the case that that energy which is naturally within them is going to be somehow disappear from them? No. It's going to be there, but now it's going to show up in a different sort of way. The way that they bully the other children, the way that they talk back to us, these are all manifestations of a root cause. Sometimes we see behavior in our children, which stems from something that they have seen in the household. For example, if I, as a husband, speak rudely to my wife in front of my children, do I think that somehow my children aren't going to be recording this? They might not show any immediate reaction, but believe me, that scene and those words and that tone of voice is going to be captured within them. And one day, when they are speaking with my wife, as in the capacity of her being their mother, that same tone of voice and the same attitude is going to come to them as well too. The negative behavior that parents or older siblings display at home has an immediate negative effect on the children as well too. So sometimes when we see the behavior of our children being negative, we should go back and ask whether we ourselves are the cause of that. And finally, brothers and sisters, if it's the case that our children actually are in need of discipline, then the discipline that we do for them should be on the basis of love. There's a difference here. When somebody wants a discipline and the desire is based on love versus the desire on the basis of fulfilling some type of personal revenge that they have, or personal desire that they have against their child. In one case, the tone of voice is going to be gentle. The expression in the eyes is going to be different. The child themselves is going to know that even though my father or mother loves me, they're asking me to do this type of small punishment right here, this small deprivation right here, they themselves will willingly go for that punishment. On the other hand, if the way that the punishment is done is based on pure anger and malice and harsh voices and no love in the picture, then we'll see that not only is it not going to have the necessary effect, but on the contrary, the child is going to start fearing the parents. And God forbid if our children fear us, because if they fear us, then they're going to turn to others for solace and comfort. And they're going to be giving them advice that we will never give them. Peace and salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This has been just an introduction to the topic of child raising and looking at some differences that we have from the teachings of Islam versus what might be done by somebody who is just following this culture of instant gratification. There are many issues and subjects within the topic of Islamic child raising. This wasn't the forum for that. I just wanted to mention some points. Inshallah, this will serve as an inspiration for those parents or those who will be parents to go and research it further. Please say one more salawat. On this night of Ashura, of Muharram, we wish to once more look at the examples of some of the companions of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Those companions who he himself said that he has never known anybody to have companions who are more loyal or in a better status or a higher elevated status than his companions. One of the companions that I'd like to speak about tonight was called Muslim ibn Awsaja. Muslim was an elderly man when the incident of Karbala took place. He was a companion of the Prophet. He had seen the Prophet. He was somebody who was renowned for his zuhd and for his ilm. He would always be seen worshipping Allah. And he was known for his courageousness in battle as well too. People would tell tales of how in the early years when Islam was expanding, Muslim ibn Awsaja was one of those warriors who would do things that no one would ever believe that anybody could do. Muslim at that time was living in Kufa, and he was considered one of the elite and the noblemen of the Shia. Muslim had a friend who was also a companion of the Prophet, who, when you look at history, was one of the renowned companions and one of the leaders of the Shia, and his name was Habib ibn Madahir. Habib was somebody who was so special that he would always be seen in the company of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and he was considered to be among the Ashabus Sir, those special companions who were given knowledge about the status of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam that nobody else was given. I want to mention a few things about the history of Karbala that will help us appreciate the status of these individuals, in particular Habib. And then we'll inshallah move to the musibat. Habib was one of those people who wrote the first letter that was addressed to Imam Hussein alayhi salam from Kufa, inviting him to come to Kufa, and his signature was there on that letter. On the day of Ashura, Habib was the one who was always accompanying Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We're told when different incidents took place, and Imam Hussein wished to consult somebody, he would consult Habib and takes his opinion on what to do. At one point, on the 9th of Muharram, Umar ibn Sa'd orders his army to go and attack the army of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. When Imam Hussein is warned about the coming of the army, he sends Abbas alayhi salam as his representative, and he says, go and choose some of the companions and go and face this enemy army. Abbas chooses only the elite of the companions, and he goes and talks to them. He finds out what they're doing, and now he goes back to Imam Hussein alayhi salam to tell them that they want to attack. He leaves Habib ibn Madahir in charge of responding to the enemy. And Habib tells them that by Allah, you are the evil people. He wants to awaken the consciousness in them. He was a very eloquent speaker. He was respected among them because of his age and the fact that he was a companion of the Prophet. You are the people who on the day of resurrection will be raised as the murderers of the household of the Prophet. You will be known as the killers of these righteous servants of Allah. Habib was the spokesperson from the companions, and he was the one who was appointed to be in charge of the left-hand side of the army of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Let us now go through some of the incidents that took place on the day of Ashura. As-salamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. As-salamu alayka ya ibna Rasulallah. السلام عليك يا سفينة النجاة يا حسين بن علي وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. Our peace and blessings be upon those noble companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Among them Habib ibn Madahir and Muslim ibn Awsaja. We can only imagine how the camp of Imam Hussein alayhi salam must have been longing for these two companions. Maybe Zainab alayhi salam and the women folk were anxious to know and see who was going to join Imam Hussein, who was going to respond to his call. Maybe it was the case when they were informed that Habib has arrived. The women of the Ahlul Bayt find some solace and comfort knowing that Imam Hussein will not be left alone. It was on the 9th of Muharram that Habib has an idea. He goes to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he tells him that nearby the Banu Asad are camped. They are my family. Let me go to them and convince them to come and join you. Imam Hussein alayhi salam gives him permission to accomplish this noble task. He goes to his people, he tells them about what Imam Hussein is standing for. He promises them that if you come with me and you attain martyrdom, then your reward will be that you will be in the company of your Prophet. There are 90 among them who respond to him. They are making their way towards the camp of Imam Hussein. Imagine what Habib must be feeling inside of him. He has brought so much help for his Imam. But on the way they are detained by an army of 400 men dispatched by Umar ibn Sa'd. There is fighting that takes place. One by one, those 90 people run away from him. Habib is left alone. What is he thinking? Maybe he's thinking, how is he going to face Imam Hussein alayhi salam? Maybe Imam Hussein will think that I have failed. But when he goes to the Imam and tells him what has happened, the Imam alayhi salam has one thing to say to him. He says, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Oh Habib, don't imagine that Allah is absent from this picture. Don't you know that everything in this universe takes place with the permission of Allah? This is enough to give Habib the strength that he needs. Let us go now to the day of Ashura.
Muslim ibn Awsaja is one of the first companions to go and fight the enemy. He fights valiantly, but eventually he falls to the ground. Imam Hussein alayhi salam and Habib rush to the side of their old friend Muslim. Imam Hussein alayhi salam calls out, Rahimakallahu ya Muslim. May Allah have mercy upon you, ya Muslim. And then he quotes the line from the Quran. فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَنْتَظِرُ وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. Habib bends down to the face of his old friend and companion. Maybe he must have been thinking about those days that they were in the company of the Prophet, how they used to have special meetings with Imam Ali alayhi salam. He tells him, "Oh Muslim, it is very difficult for me to bear your loss, but be happy because you will be entering the paradise. Ya Muslim, abshir bil Jannah." And then he asks him, "Is there anything that I can do for you, Muslim?" What is it that Muslim is concerned about at this point? He points to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and he tells his friend Habib, "Inni usika bihadha." Oh Habib, don't look at me, but look at him. Look at our Imam Hussein. Oh Habib, fight for him until you are killed. On the day of Ashura, Habib ibn Madahir is anxious to also join the ranks of the martyrs. Imam Hussein alayhi salam is about to say his prayers. One of the enemy soldiers calls out saying, "Pray as much as you want, but they will be not accepted from you." Habib ibn Madahir cannot take this insult. He tells him that, "How can you say that? Do you think that your prayers will be accepted and not be accepted from the son of the messenger of Allah?" Imagine the state of these people. They are now saying that the grandson of the Prophet's prayers will not be accepted. Habib enters battle with the enemy. He cries out, "Ana Habibu wa Abi Madahir, لَنَحْنُ أَزْكَى مِنْكُمْ وَأَطْهَرُ نَنْصُرُ خَيْرَ النَّاسِ حِينَ يُذْكَرُ." I am Habib and I am the son of Madahir. My father is Madahir. We are purer than you and we are the ones who have come to help the best of people. Habib ibn Madahir fights bravely. He kills many of the soldiers, but eventually they surround him. They have no mercy, despite his old age and his white beard. One of them hits him from the front and the other from the back. What can he do? Habib falls from his horse. He is not going to give up. As he tries to stand up, one of the soldiers cuts off his head. Imam Hussein alayhi salam goes to his side. He rests his head in his lap and he cries out with tears in his eyes, "Oh Habib, how excellent a man you were. You would recite the whole Quran in a single night. What is going to happen to that blessed head? The enemy soldiers are fighting over it. All of them want to take it to Umar ibn Sa'd, they want to take it to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad to receive their reward. After the battle, one of them strings the blessed head of Habib to his horse. He makes his way to Kufa and he ends up in the house of the governor. As he is making his way there, he sees this young boy who is always following him. He goes inside, the boy is with him. He goes outside, the boy is with him. Finally he addresses him. He asks him, "Who are you? Why are you following me? And why are you looking at this head so much? Can't you see that I'm busy? I have work to do." the young boy introduces himself. He says that I am Qasim, the son of Habib, the son of Madahir. That head that you have with you is the head of my father. I want to get his head so I can give it a proper burial. The soldier, la'anatullah alayhi, says, how can I give you the head of your father? If I give it back to you, I won't be able to get the reward from the Amir. This is the head of Habib al-Madahir. Imagine the longing of the son to have the head of his father. There are other children who are longing to see the head of their father. As they enter Sham, the daughters of Hussein are wondering what happened to the head of their father. Sakina alayha salam wishes to see her father for one more time. But when Yazid shows them the head of their father, they are unable to take the side of their father being as such. Allah la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسين. يا حسين.